Good evening, another episode of West Sussex Unwrapped, the series now in its fourth year, in which we've been exploring different aspects of the history of West Sussex through the collections of West Sussex Record Office and Screen Archive South East. My name is Wendy Walker, I'm the County Archivist, and I'm delighted that you've been able to join us tonight. A few words of housekeeping before we begin. We will be recording this event for our Record Office YouTube channel, so that you can catch up with it later and hopefully also recommend it to family and friends. If you have any questions as we go through tonight, could I ask you to put them into the chat box? We'll be monitoring these as we go through and we'll come to them at the end and pick up on those questions. So tonight, we will be looking at coronations past and present, finding out how people came together to celebrate these events in the past. We'll be looking through written records, photographic records, and moving images to bring these events to life across the county and across the generations. We also have a special request for you all at the end of the programme, asking for your help in recording this year's events on the 6th of May. So stay with us to find out how you can help make history and add your story to the archives. Tonight, we have with us Jane King, who's the Business and Partnership Manager, and Michael McVeigh, the Collections Manager, both from Screen Archive South East. I'm going to be sharing with you some of the many archives at the Record Office, and Jane and Michael will be showing clips of the festivities surrounding the coronations of King George VI in 1937 and that of the late Queen Elizabeth in 1953. The coronation of the king or the queen is a ceremony that goes back over 1,000 years. Westminster Abbey was the location for the coronation of William I on Christmas Day in 1066, as you can see here from the Bayeux tapestry. The historian Odoric Vitalis, writing in the 12th century in his Ecclesiastical History, records that this was not without incident, as William sought to cement his victory and set himself up on the throne of England. Aldred, the Archbishop of York, performed the ceremony, presenting the new king to the people for them to shout their approval. Legend has it that the Norman soldiers outside thought that the noise inside indicated that something was amiss and began setting fire to the houses around the abbey. Smoke filled the church and the congregation fled. Odoric records that as the fire spread rapidly through the houses, the people who had been rejoicing in the church were thrown into confusion, and a crowd of men and women of every rank and status, compelled by this disaster, rushed out of the church. Only the bishops and the clergy, along with the monks, stayed, terrified, in front of the altar, and only just managed to complete the consecration rite over the king, who was trembling violently. Nearly everyone else ran towards the raging fire, some to fight bravely against the force of the flames, but more hoping to grab loot for themselves. And amid such great confusion, the English, believing there was a plot behind something so completely unlooked for, were extremely angry and afterwards held the Normans in suspicion and judged them treacherous. I think it's fair to say that coronation events have come a long way in the last 1,000 years. The Bayeux tapestry also records the coronation of his predecessor. I'm sorry, I'm trying to make the... There we go. His predecessor, Harold II, also in 1066, earlier that year. And he was crowned by the Archbishop of Canterbury. His predecessor, Edward the Confessor, was crowned in Winchester Cathedral on the 3rd of April in 1043. And in each of these images, you can see the king on his throne with his crown and scepter, which were the symbols of his position and his power. It is this powerful image that successive monarchs used in their documents of states, in portraits, and in manuscripts. And the image on the right is actually the Great Seal of Edward I, which would have been appended to the charters. It's cast in wax, and usually with the Great Seal, you see on the front the king on his throne, and on the reverse would have been the king on horseback. Even today, the monarch's Great Seal is appended to the official documents of state that require the authorization of the monarch. Here we see the letters patent of Edward VI from 1552 that was given to the Chichester city. And in this, the king grants to the mayor and citizens of Chichester lands, tenements, rents, privileges, courts, and other possessions and rights in the Pallant and Little London in Chichester, which had formerly belonged to the Archbishop of Canterbury and the Hospital of the Priory of St. John of Jerusalem before its dissolution, and that had afterwards had been annexed to the honour of Petworth. This also has the Great Seal attached to it, but you can't see it here because it's tucked underneath. And we know from coronation documents that the official version of events, what we don't have is what happened and the stories of the people behind it. This is an extract from that letters patent, and you can see there in the letter E of Edwardus, there is again on the throne with his crown, his orb, and his sceptre is Edward VI. If we go back to Harold Godwinson in 1066, we can see him there being crowned, and we can see a group of people on the right there who look in festive mode, but we really know no more than that. And we have to go to later records to pick out further details of coronations. If we fast forward to parish records written in the 16th and the 17th centuries, and we can find payments for the ringing of the church bells on the anniversary of the coronation or on the coronation itself. So at the top there, you can see in the Lindfield parish accounts in 1591, the amount paid for what they've written there as the Coronation Day, which would have been the anniversary of the coronation of Elizabeth I. And below in the church warden's account for Chichester St. Peter the Less, in 1685, right along the bottom there, you can see paid for ringing of the Coronation Day. And this was the coronation of James II in 1685. And here we've got the Mayor's account book from Arundel Borough. And if you go down to the fourth entry, you can see that is paid to Mr. Verrill his bill for the Coronation Day proclamation. So he's being paid to proclaim on the Coronation Day. But it isn't really until the 19th century that we start to get more records and more detailed personal records showing how people celebrated both the jubilees of their monarch and their coronations. We know, for example, that in Chichester, there was a tradition of decorating replica arches and putting them up where the four city gates had originally been in the city. The gates themselves were removed in the 18th century, but the replica gates were decorated and put up for Queen Victoria's Diamond Jubilee, her Jubilee in 1887, her Diamond in 1897, and again for the coronations of Edward VII in 1902 and George V in 1911. And streets were decorated across the county with parades, events, festivities arranged by local parish and town councils. In Chichester, commemorative mugs were commissioned by the mayor and given to children at tea parties in Priory Park. And on the coronation of George V in 1911 and again in 1937, silver and bronze medals were presented to the children. And here we can see Hobbs the Bakers decorated in 1902. We can also see here the decorations in Petworth in 1902, and these would have been replicated in towns and villages across the county. The archives also include invitations to the coronation itself, as well as tickets and souvenir programs. So the Shillingly manuscripts include the invitation sent to Earl Winterton for the coronation of George V. And intriguingly, also in this archive, we have the Earl Marshal's orders on the correct form of dress to be worn by the peerage. Amongst the diocesan archives shown here, we have the Order of Service at Westminster Abbey, together with a more humorous ticket on the right for Hyde Park, where the bearer is invited to watch the procession from a tree, to wear brightly coloured hosiery, and partake of tripe and gin and it. In towns and villages across West Sussex, people took to the streets to celebrate, with a procession of kings and queens through Horsham in 1937 on the left here, and on the right there is a parade of floats going through Storrington. Local schools also became involved and joined in the festivities. The Burgess Hill school logbook, which you can see an extract from here, described the events at the infants and junior school, which was probably replicated across the county. In this, it says that several members of the Burgess Hill UDC and also some of the managers visited the school PM to distribute coronation mugs in honour of the coronation of King George VI and Queen Elizabeth. A short programme of songs was rendered by the children, and an address was given to them by the pastor, H. Holden, after which the mugs were distributed by the chairman of Burgess Hill UDC, Mr. George Coleman. The Reverend G. Tyndall Atkinson proposed a vote of thanks, and the proceedings closed with the singing of the national anthem. And it then records that the school closed at the end of the afternoon session for 2 days special holiday on the occasion of the coronation, to be followed by the Whitsun holidays. The Royal Sussex Regiment also were involved in the celebrations. And here we have a programme, a brochure that was issued on the coronation of King George VI. And at that time, the 4th Battalion of the Royal Sussex Regiment were on duty as part of the procession. And inside this, just before they went up to Horsham to do their duty, they took a photograph of the detachment who were going to be lining the streets as part of the procession. And the nice thing about this is not only that you see them all, but actually all of the different people involved are named, so we know exactly who took part. We also know more about what went into the planning of these events from local committee minutes and papers. Burgess Hill, and you can see part of the Burgess Hill minute book here for their Coronation Celebrations Committee, met regularly to plan and organise the events. And the proposals included decorating the streets and buildings, arrangements for the television show, and plans for acquiring the necessary equipment for this. And the town clerk was instructed to find out from something called the Good Old Timers Club how many were likely to attend. The Parish Hall, the WI, and St Andrew's Hall were all considered as venues for this. A performance of Merry England was planned by the Burgess Hill Choral Society and Music Club, and the minutes record that due to costs, this would probably not be performed in costume. There were children's teas and sports, old people's tea, with the WVS providing the entertainment and the WI helping out. So everyone was involved. They were originally also planning for a motorcycle gymkhana, and there was a proposal for a flying model aircraft display, but I don't know whether those actually took place. And it was going to be finished with a torchlight procession and fireworks. Chichester City Council set up a special coronation committee, which met for the first time in 1952 and carried on meeting through the year. Not all of the planning went smoothly. The country was still under a degree of rationing, and the Queen had herself urged that no undue expense should be put upon people. Alan Green has carried out some fascinating research into the planning and delivery of the Chichester coronation festivities, as set out in his article celebrating the coronation of Queen Elizabeth II in Chichester, June 1953. And you can find a copy of that article in the Record Office. And I'm indebted to him for allowing me to share some of the findings with you tonight. A huge children's tea party was originally planned to be held in Priory Park, the scene of previous coronation festivities, only to be abandoned when J. Lyons, of Lyons Corner House fame, was unable to provide all of the necessary foods. Similarly, the idea of a mayoral ball had to be dropped when neither Billy Cotton nor Ted Heath was available to provide the music. In May 1953, Alice Eastland became the first female mayor of Chichester, and she was invited to attend the coronation at Westminster Abbey. She was the only Chichester person there, with the exception of the Royal Sussex Regiment, who were once again on duty, lining the route at Hyde Park Corner, and local policemen who'd been drafted in to support the Met. The final programme for Chichester included a competition for the best dressed shops, and that was going to be judged on the 29th of June. The coronation service at the Cathedral on the preceding Sunday, the 31st of May. On the day itself, there was a royal 12-gun salute at 8 a.m, followed by, at 11:15, the television relay of the coronation at the Cathedral, followed at 2:30 by the children's sports, which had originally been planned for the recreation ground, but actually moved to Priory Park in the end. 4:30, there was a presentation by the mayor of the sports prizes, and at 6:30, there was a carnival procession. And this ran through the Cattle Market, Market Avenue, South Street, West Street, Orchard Street, North Street, East Street, St Pancras, and finally into the recreation ground. At 9 p.m, the Queen's message was relayed there live to the recreation ground. And then at 10 o'clock, there was a firework display there. And also at 10 o'clock, a bonfire was lit at the top of the trundle, having been built by the Boy Scouts. And this started a sequence of bonfires across the South Downs. At 8 p.m. to midnight, there was a square dance in the barracks. And on the 3rd of June, the following day, there was an old people's concert at Chichester High School for girls, with a tree planting ceremony in Jubilee Gardens on the 4th of June. And then finally, from the 11th to the 13th of June, there was a pageant, the Acts of St Richard, which was staged in the forecourt of the Bishop's Palace, marking the 700th anniversary of the death of St Richard. And on the 13th of June, the Archbishop of Canterbury came to dedicate the coronation window at the Cathedral. It was designed by Christopher Webb and replaced a window that had been damaged during the Second World War. Dr. Bishop, who was the headmaster of Chichester High School for Boys, writing about the coronation in his editorial in the summer term 1953 school magazine, The Martlet, stated that the school, which had been founded in 1928, had only seen one previous coronation, and opined that we fervently expect it will not be before the year 2000 that we celebrate another. And I'm sure he'd have been gratified to know that he was out by a further 23 years. A souvenir programme was issued by the City Council, but sadly none of these have survived. And if anyone knows of one, please do get in touch and we'd love to hear from you. We do have coronation programmes for many of the other towns and villages, and here is a selection of them: from Crawley, from Worthing, Horsted Keynes, Cookfield, Lancing, and Bognor Regis. We also have a souvenir programme for Granion Hospital in Chichester. And you can see there the coronation dinner menu and the programme of events. We also have lots of posters recording the events. And here you can see a selection from Pulborough and from Arundel, but there are lots of these from across the county. But it just shows you the extent of the activities and the events that people came to and were involved with. And finally, we have many, many photographs, and these are just a small selection. So if we go from the top left, we've got a rather charming fancy dress competition at Duncton. Moving across, we've got the tree planting ceremony at Bognor and Chichester, and then the parade at North Munden. And on the top right, we have Chichester Street Party. Bottom left, we have the Fernhurst pageant, and then bottom right is the Pulborough Street Party. And what brings all of this to life really are the film archives held by Screen Archives South East. And I'm now going to pass over to Jane and Michael to show you some of the wonderful moving images from their collections.
Oh, thank you, Wendy, and good evening, everyone. As a short introduction, although 4 coronations of the 20th century were captured on film, the earliest examples we have in our collection date from the 1937 coronation of King George VI and his wife Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon. Both the coronations of Edward VII in 1902 and George V in 1911 were filmed by early newsreel companies such as British Mutoscope and British Pathé. These films are now being cared for by the British Film Institute and are part of the National Collection. So in our collection, we have both amateur and professionally made films from both the 1937 and the 1953 coronations. And first, I thought we'd take a look at some of the professionally made films, made for use by cinemas, societies, and communities, but also aimed at the domestic market. These films came in a variety of gauges, being available to purchase at chemists and photography shops. Sorry, I'm just trying to play the film. These souvenir films were packaged in cardboard boxes and priced accordingly. The one here with the red label was priced at £22 with sound, £18 silent, which is really quite an expensive purchase for the time, given that the average weekly salary in 1953 was around £9. As well as single titles for the domestic market, we also have home cinema release compilations. These would have provided viewers with a visual portrait of what was happening on the wider world stage at the time of the coronation, reporting on national and international events that had taken place during the year. For example, this is News Review of 1937 from Pathé. Moving on to the amateur films we have in our collection, we have over 70 films of coronation celebrations held across the southeast of England. We also have films showing coronation events in London, filmed by southeast residents who travelled to the capital with their cine cameras and who captured the occasion as bystanders. The first short film clip we prepared here shows scenes from those celebrations in London. The first images show Camberwell, a residential area of southeast London. This film came to us in 2001 as part of a much larger collection from a resident of Hassocks, West Sussex, and it was filmed on 16mm colour stock by the donor's relative, Arthur Ford. You can see the London smog there in the distance. Here we see the arrival of Indian soldiers representing the Commonwealth. And these soldiers would later have taken part in the procession to the Abbey. These scenes here show Whitehall and the Foreign and Commonwealth Office by the Cenotaph. And the old War Office building can be seen in the distance. Next, we move a little closer to home. The earliest coronation films that we have from West Sussex date from 1937 and show how the residents of Chichester and Bognor Regis celebrated the occasion. This first clip was filmed by a member of the Chichester Cine Club. And we believe this scene was filmed on East Street. And we now see Charles Howard, a leading member of the Chichester Cine Club, standing in the doorway of his photography shop on North Street. This next clip is from a local newsreel compilation entitled Regis Review, filmed on 16mm colour stock by the Bognor Regis Film Society. And the film opens here with scenes of Chichester's streets decorated in flags and bunting. And here we are on a drizzly Bognor Regis seafront. And the parade we see took place on Coronation Day itself, Wednesday the 12th of May, 1937. Founded in 1934, the Bognor Regis Film Society produced several local, topical newsreels and dramas for screening at different venues in the town, including the 2,000-seat Theatre Royal. And it's no wonder that they took the opportunity to film such an important event for their community, presumably with the aim of later screening it to the very people that took part in this event. And so, moving on to the 1953 coronation of Queen Elizabeth on the 2nd of June 1953. This next film is entitled Coronation Horsham, and it shows the celebrations taking place in Upper Bennett's Road, a residential district to the east of Horsham Centre. Unfortunately, the name of the filmmaker is unknown, but they most probably lived on that street, as the film was deposited with the archive by a resident of Upper Bennett's Road. And here, free coronation beakers were given out to every child who wished one. And one little child here was given a coronation coin. We now follow with a clip from an oral history. In 2013, we ran a community project to share films and gather memories from residents of West Sussex seaside towns. And here we have Sue from Bognor and Chichester recounting her memories of Coronation Day.
I can remember it was in 53, so I would have been 4. I can remember my grandmother coming to stay and having to stand on the table while they made this dress for me, because they had a fancy dress for coronation on the 6th of June. And all the kids in the street went in for it. So they were all dressed up in different things. And I just happened to be in a Union Jack, I think, a dress made of a Union Jack. And we had to, my brother was dressed as a little drummer boy, and my older sister was dressed as the woman that's on the coins. I don't think they have on coins anymore, with a shield and, I can't remember what, Britannia. It was quite a hot day, I remember. It's funny what you remember it for, isn't it? It was quite a hot day, and we had this competition, and we were all one day, and then we all had a tea party. And it was done in several stages. Kids first, younger children first, because of course they weren't going to be up all day. Then the older children, and then adults. And they had lots of things going on in the street, most of it to do with children, but they also had a men's race down the street. And that was quite funny. I can remember that. I can remember my dad was in it and he was last. But it was very, very community-minded street. It was shaped in a horseshoe, and everybody knew everybody. You know, us gang of kids, we just sort of generally was quite free within that area, you know.
And I'll now hand you over to my colleague Michael to introduce the next couple of films.
Good evening, everybody. Our next example is a gorgeous colour film featuring the village of Lindfield, which was filmed by Cyril Hayworth. Cyril was an amateur filmmaker and a scoutmaster who relocated to London, from London to West Sussex after the Second World War. He documented many scenes and events in and around Lindfield during the 1940s, 50s and 60s. And Cyril held regular charity film shows, accompanying his films with pre-recorded music in the background. And the film we're now showing, it was edited posthumously by Dick Rawling, a member of the Haywards Heath Cine and Video Society. As you can see, the villagers were extremely organised, appointing a Lindfield Coronation Celebration Committee to organise the events. And one of these even took place on the village pond, right in front of the King Edward Hall on Lindfield's High Street. This next event was a dog race. And this next event was a slow bicycle race. And the rules are that feet cannot touch the ground. And the last one over the line wins. Our final film is called Coronation Celebrations in Burgess Hill, and it was filmed over 7 days by Mr. Barnsden, who was the headmaster of the London Road School. It begins on the 31st of May with an outdoor Thanksgiving service. While on the following day, Monday the 1st of June, the children of Burgess Hill competed in highly organised sporting events and races. And on Coronation Day itself, it's a whole town affair. Even local companies got in on the act. Here we can see the electricity showroom dressed up to the nines, as well as Jaeger, the maker of ladies' twin sets. And here's the tractor work company showing off a very regal looking tractor, all adorned in bunting. Once again, coronation beakers were given out to every child. Now make a note of these two little girls. They'll appear again in our story. Now we see Burgess Hill's older residents making their way to the parish hall to watch the coronation ceremony on television. This event was by invitation only, with the tickets being distributed by the town's Old People's Welfare Committee. And it may well have been the first time many of the town's residents had ever watched television, since fewer than 2 million British homes even owned a TV set at the beginning of 1953.
Pass back to Wendy.
Okay, clips from this film were used around the time of last year's Platinum Jubilee in a news report by the BBC. And following this, one of the two girls in berets seen earlier came forward to say that she'd recognised herself and her sister. That girl, now in her 70s, let us know that hers was one of the few families who owned a television set at the time, and that she remembers all the neighbours coming around to watch the coronation in the family's living room. She also mentioned that her father was a keen amateur filmmaker, and as a result of seeing herself on the local news, She's now kindly deposited over 300 of her father's films with us, many of which feature Sussex in the 1950s and 60s. And now Jane and I will pass you back to Wendy.
Thank you, Michael and Jane, for sharing those wonderful films with us and the stories behind them. Everything you've seen tonight has really only been possible because of all the archives that have been brought into the Record Office and to Screen Archives South East over the years. And we'd now like to ask for your help in adding to the archives. I'm just going to share my screen again with you. We would like your help in recording the events this year on the 6th of May, and we'd like you to send us in your films, photographs and information about the 6th of May and about any events that you're taking part in, so that we can keep a record of how the county celebrated this year, to keep alongside the records of past coronations. And indeed, if anyone has any records or films of previous coronations, we would love to hear from you as well. And remember those missing Chichester programmes. The contact details you can see on this screen here, and we would ask you to contact either the Record Office at the email address there, or Screen Archive South East. You can also find these contact details on our current blog about the coronations past and present, and a recording of tonight's webinar will be going up on our YouTube channel, so you'll be able to catch it again there. And we'd also like to draw your attention to a special coronation display that we have currently up at the Record Office, so do pop in and take a look if you're passing. And I'm now going to have a quick look in the chat box to see what questions we've got. I don't think we've actually got any questions from anybody. We have actually put up a short questionnaire. If we could ask you to fill in online, that would be really helpful, and would help us to understand how much you've enjoyed it or not, and things that we can do in future episodes. So please do fill it in if you could. I think I'd like to conclude by really thanking everybody who's been involved in the production tonight and in tonight's event. A very special thank you to our speakers. And you can catch up on all of these episodes and previous episodes on the Record Office YouTube channel. You can find out details of our other events and talks programme on our website. And thank you very much to all of you who've joined us tonight. We very much enjoyed your company, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.